Why is Elden Ring's open world great, and what open worlds can learn from it? So, in this topic, since Elden Ring's been out for quite a while, it has shown quite a few number of things that open worlds nowadays don't really seem to have a sense of engagement within them. They feel not necessarily as a world to explore, but rather as a just a giant level for you to just go around in. There's not really a lot of purposes to it, other than just one of the more easier ones, which is a mechanical reason for you to engage in the open world, which is going to lead me to say what open worlds now don't really have, which is, as I said before, a lack of engagement. There's no real desire to enter into the open world. So, because there's no exploration reason or story reason to engage within it. And this is where I say that the only reason to explore in many open worlds is mostly for mechanical engagement. You have higher numbers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's without the coupling of a story that makes it worse. As in this other example with Skyrim's story and open world, because they are disconnected from each other. In Skyrim, why do you engage in the open world? For a variety of reasons. But one thing that discourages you from exploring the open world is the story itself. The story simply as Alduin the World Eater is going to destroy everything. Cool. You're told that from the get go, from the loading screen, and from the first dragon you ever see. Like, okay, cool, Alduin is here, finally. And because of that, I feel like there is a issue for letting the player to actually explore the open world and to have anything else to do with it. Because if your story actively discourages you from exploring the open world because of the story constraints, then the open world doesn't really have any purpose to it. And when you finish the main story, large amounts of people wouldn't really want to continue because there's a finality to it. There's a I just finished the game, so why should I continue on it? And it's obviously not necessarily a universal thing. Many people still continue playing games after they're finished and just do other things as well. But there is a sort of risk to doing that because not a lot of people do that. And additionally, it makes a lot of the content that was made for the open world to be unexplored. And while Bethesda games in general don't necessarily have the same goal as other open worlds, such as, for example, Elden Ring, it does show that not having a story that forces the player to engage within it can allow the player to explore all their options within the open world, which then leads me to other examples that at least try to achieve not one to one what Elden Ring is trying to do, but at least something similar in the vein of it, such as with Master of Andromeda and Halo. The open worlds in Master of Andromeda and Halo Infinite are trying to tell you a story, but also trying to get you exploring, but they are disconnected in a sense because you don't really have to explore. You can beeline it through it, and there's no real reason for the exploration. Mechanical reasons, sure, but that's an easier one to do, and most people complain about a story reason because, again, if the story disincentivizes you from exploring, then the open world just feels very confusing to have, which leads me to why Elden Ring does this. It's because the marrying the story and the mechanics into the world give you a reason to engage in the open world, and all of those things is that when the player is encouraged both mechanically and story wise to engage in the open world, it makes it feel a lot more alive. Not necessarily that there's more NPCs or there's more encounters, but that having a reason to engage in the open world without feeling like you're allowing the world to destroy itself makes the game feel better. Because in Elden Ring's case, the story is quite easily you needed to defeat all four of these guys. They have the shards of the Elden Ring, so you can become the Elden Lord. Do that. Also, additionally, it both implies and explicitly says that this has been going on for quite a while. Many Tarnished has tried to defeat these guys, and they're not really doing much of anything. They're not going out trying to get the other great shards because they could die, and one could have more power than the other. And additionally, this has just been going on for like years and years and years and years. You're not shaking up things immediately. You're just another player in the game, and that allows the player to have a good justification to not only explore the open world for mechanical reasons, for story reasons, because if you get stronger mechanically, it makes the story feel like it's progressing because the whole thing is you rising to the occasion to become the Elden Lord, to become stronger. And this is done really well because it tells the player both from the first boss you fight that you die, that okay, cool, you die, and then when it tells you how to level up, it's like, okay, you level up, you get stronger, okay, cool. And then the same thing happens with Godric's Soldier, the boss, for the after you die. It's like, okay, cool, so it seems like if I get stronger, some enemies are weaker, some enemies I can defeat if I just get stronger. And then the same happens with the Tree Sentinel. Like, okay, the Tree Sentinel is just a bit too difficult for me. I can either stay here and just bash my head against it, or go out in the open world and then attempt to get stronger to fight him later. There's a lot of ways that the game incentivizes you to explore the open world, both mechanically and for story reasons. And additionally, another thing that a lot of open world games lack is good traversal mechanics. And this is for a good reason most of the time, because sometimes, at least with horse combat in any game, it can kind of take it over. And as you can even see sometimes in Elden Ring's world, that they have to make certain areas inaccessible to torrent, because if they do that, if they allow torrent to just go anywhere, one, it'll be very funny because hallways with torrents in it would be very funny and humorous to look at. But additionally, it would make a lot other bosses much more easier to find, especially the story bosses. Having more mobility to fight is a lot easier to just defeat them. Like the Millennia boss fight, she has a lot of combos to her, and that can be very hard to avoid. But if you have torrent there, you can just run around her. It's very hard for her to get anything to get any damage onto you if you have such high mobility. And that is one thing that a lot of open worlds have to kind of consider and put a lot of time and depth into. Elden Ring can do that because of the nature of the game, but a lot of other games can't, such as, for example, Dragon Age Inquisition and Skyrim as well to an extent. But at least for Dragon Age Inquisition, the mount that you can get don't really do anything other than just allow you to get from point A to point B. Because if they do allow you to do anything more than that, they would take over the game. Because not only do you have more mobility, but then you have easier ways to get in and out of fights and to deal out damage. And that sort of combat mechanics now has to be developed to make the game feel good. Otherwise, again, it'll just feel very poor. And this is where I'll say that there should be a lot more emphasis on good traversal mechanics, but not in the traditional sense. Any fantasy open world doesn't have to have a horse or mounts for their game. They can have other traversal mechanics. Assassin's Creed, while it does have horses as well in at least the earlier games, uh, you can just use the parkour system. That is a traversal mechanic. It's very interesting. It's player based and it's mechanical based. You can get good at it. You can feel rewarded from being not great at parkour to being great at parkour. Same thing with the Spider-Man games. So that's at least one thing that a lot of open worlds and miss is that trying to make good traversal mechanics of these situations that they are in. It is obvious why developers don't want to have horse combat or anything like that because it can just take over the game. You just it'll be really hard to balance, and it'll just take a lot of development time away from more important areas. And now I'm going to talk about another open world just to wrap up, just to say that what this game, at least for Far Cry 6, where the problems are with it. And that is mostly that it is a very beautiful open world. It is really gorgeous, like honestly. But there's no real reason beyond the fact that you can do it to get better gear and stuff. Because Far Cry 6 has gear. And while that is good. There's no real reason for you not to just do the main story. And while the Far Cry games in general do have reasons to explore the open world and to engage in it, it does make it a little harder to justify because it's not really an incentive or an actual reason to do it. You're not having the player do at least a few of these missions to see how they work and why they should do them and what consequences are if you do them. And that sort of thing kind of makes it feel hollow in a way. And this is where now I want to talk about these two games and how they can be improved. At least in not I can fix them, I'm the super genius of the world or whatever, but more as a I want to at least give some explanation on how I think the things that I want, trying to tie story mechanics and the open world all together, can actually work. Especially because I think Mass Effect Andromeda and Halo Infinite certainly can do this because there's a lot of ways that they can have this sort of philosophy. So for Halo Infinite, I'll start because it's the easier one of the two, or quickest one to explain, is that you as Master Chief are now basically in the aftermath of the Banished victory. You know, the UNSC is all scattered, a lot of the Spartans are dead. It's just you, the AI, the weapon AI, and the pilot. Cool, that's all you have. And the game could have at least incentivized you saying that if you save Marines, destroy banished encampments, and did all of that, you could then have these big battles then. The first place you go to in Halo Infinite, the first main story area you go to, you could have all the Marines you've collected, all of the resources you've had, and see less banished forces there because of what you did in that area. And to me, I feel like while that shouldn't be forced on the player because the player should decide if they want to do that or not, I do feel like having the ability to do that and see the consequences of you doing that all the encampments you defeated, all the Marines you've rescued, and all the high assassination targets you destroyed has an effect that makes the game easier for you, that you can alter the situation that you can have. And that can go throughout the entire game, especially as you rescue more Marines and you get more points, the Marines do get better. You get more Marines, you get better armor, you get more vehicles, and this can be scaled up to make it feel really great. And while I don't think this can solve every issue, especially because this requires a lot of development time and a lot of the development will be going to focus on those areas, I do think that would give a better reason for not only the Master Chief to explore, but it wouldn't feel as bad because it's like, okay, so you now are caught between saving Marines who are either imprisoned, being executed, or actively gonna get shot at, or oh yeah, you need to do this other thing because if you don't, the entire galaxy could be possibly destroyed. One is obviously more dire than the other, but both are still situations where the player is kind of like, wait, which should I do though? And in this new way I'm proposing is that you can have the player say, okay, I will explore the open area because it will contribute to the story. Having more guys to help me save the galaxy makes sense. It makes logical sense. And when I do that, it's okay, that's done, that's over. Now I can get on to the main story. Or you can have the player just decide, no, I'm not going to do the open world stuff. I'm just going to leave line it through the story. And I think that way, to me, makes it better. I'm not sure if it solves it. There is probably something I'm missing, but I do feel like it makes it at least a bit better. And now for Master of Andromeda, and this one's going to be just a tad longer, is that for Andromeda, they have at least what I think is a really great way and a really great incentive for to explore the open world, especially because of the whole themes of Andromeda of colonization and whatnot. Is that you have this thing called Andromeda viability points, and what Andromeda viability points are is essentially the better you take care of the planet you're trying to put an outpost on, the more threats you get rid of and all of those other associated requirements, the higher the percentage will go up to a maximum of 100%. And this can allow the player to and allow the developer to gate progression, because how it stands in Andromeda now is that you have to go to EOS, explore it, and then get a certain amount of viability points to set up your outpost. And then after you do that, then you go to Aya, and then after you talk to that, it's not an open world, it's just a quick level, it's a hub area. And then after you do that, you then have to go to Kadara, which is an open world, but you don't have to engage in the open world. All you have to do is talk with the head honcho there. She'll either say, hey, you can talk to him, but I'll kill him later, or you can rescue him, and that's the thing as well. And then you can just leave to immediately to the next area, which is Fold, which is also an open area, but you don't have an open world area, but you don't have to engage in it either. So, and then immediately you can go to a station that leads you to the final place that you're looking for, and none of any of those quest markers said to you, hey, explore the open world, other than EOS. And I feel like that's such a missed opportunity, especially because it can make the open world feel less relevant, and especially because I ignored two other open world areas, Elden and Havarl, two optional open world areas where you don't have to engage in at all. And that's kind of the big issue with Andromeda. There's no reason beyond the mechanics that you have to. You're not told by the story that you have to do it, and you're not really incentivized, because in the story, you finding this terraforming network at the hub of where it all is will make colonization easier. And that, to me, while it does give a reason to engage in the main quest, it does not make it easier to engage in side quests and in the open world in general. And I feel like the proposed solution, at least for me, is that when you go to Aya and then you have to go to Kadara, instead of, hey, you can talk to them and then leave, right? You have to do something in the open world for them. You have to engage in the open world content, and then you can talk to them and whatnot. You can have, additionally, if you just want to beeline to the story, just say, hey, I'll just save this guy quickly under her nose, and then I can just continue on with the story. But it still would be good to have the player engage in the open world, because then it would allow them to not only take a break, but also have the pacing a bit better, because all those 6 key points are back to back to back, and there's very little combat in between them, which doesn't really allow the player to, level up either in the mechanics. And then for Vold, this is a very easy one that I feel like is a huge missed opportunity. Vold was in lore one of the great planets of the Angaran species. That it was the economic powerhouse of the entire cluster that they live in, and you don't really have to help them in any way. You just go get to their leader and rescue them, and then you're done. What I feel like could have been done is, hey, we need your help to defeat some of the enemy forces so that we have a better chance to be able to assist you. Do that for us, and then we'll help you along your way, because if we don't, we could be really vulnerable in this area, and they could do a lot more damage to us. I feel like having that, especially with the viability points being able to track, like get 50% viability or maybe 35 or any number percentage, which would then have the player be like, okay, I could then continue to do that. Especially because in the open world, there's a lot of fetch quests that could have been cut in favor for more specific content about building outposts and whatnot. Especially because the more you do it, the more activity you can see in the open world as well. There's a lot of ways that these games can be improved with the allowing the player to engage in the open world. And I feel like while I didn't solve it, I don't think just doing this small video is going to do that. I do think having this sort of discussion and saying that these are the proposed solutions I have makes the game at least a bit better. But yeah, that's why Elden Ring's open world is great and what open world can learn from it. And I honestly think that, open worlds will take inspiration from Elden Ring, but I'm not sure if it's going to be the inspiration that I think they should be taking. Because I think a lot of people, what they're going to take from Elden Ring and what they're going to say that developers should take from Elden Ring is that make game hard, make big area, and have very little story, which I don't think is not necessarily that it's a bad thing, but I don't think it's the right message. It's not the actual things that make Elden Ring good. It's what makes Elden Ring from a From Software game good, but it's not what makes the open world part of it. It's the engagement of the open world, both in a story and a mechanical sense, and how they're tied both so tightly together, and additionally on how good the traversal is. You don't have to have a very cryptic story or a very hard game to have those elements. Elden Ring has those elements and filtered and viewed how open world games could use their sort of method. So if someone wants to make a Dark Souls like game with Elden Ring's model, then they'll definitely hit off the park. But if you're asking, for example, like a Bioware game and asking to make it similar to Elden Ring, that kind of loses the reason why people play Bioware games at all. Because it's not really for the cryptic storytelling. It's not really for the uh, difficulty of it. I don't think Bioware fans are not not opposed to difficulty, but not really lapping at the feet of like a Dark Souls difficulty game. But yeah, if there's any suggestions that I could have improved or something I missed, please do tell. And I hope you have a good day.